Imagine a president who turned down a $76,000 salary in a world where leaders build palaces, fly private jets, and guard their wealth behind high walls. Imagine a man who stood under the same burning sun as his people, refusing to separate himself from their daily struggles. While others traded loyalty for luxury, he chose to serve wearing the same uniform he had before the world knew his name. Ibrahim Traoré is not the president the world expected. He is the president Africa never dared to believe it could have. While critics whispered that he would fail, that he was just another soldier with ambitions larger than his vision, Traoré was quietly building factories, planting the seeds of new industries and reshaping the future of Burkina Faso. When they said he was nothing more than another coup leader, he reformed agriculture, mechanized farms, and brought life back to lands left for dead. When they said Africa needed to bow to Western blueprints, he created a model they had never seen before. A model rooted in pride, sovereignty, and self-reliance. This story isn't just about one man refusing a paycheck, it's about an idea whose time has come. It's about the possibility that African leadership doesn't have to mean corruption, that power doesn't have to mean greed, and that real change can come from unexpected places. It's about how in just 2 short years, one captain has achieved what many leaders couldn't accomplish in decades. Before we dive into the numbers, the reforms, and the battles fought both visible and invisible, I want you to understand one thing. Ibrahim Traoré is not rewriting Burkina Faso's story alone. He's challenging the entire narrative of African leadership. He's showing that it's possible to lead without selling out your country. Possible to build without borrowing your people's dignity. Possible to govern not for personal gain, but for collective freedom. Let me share something personal. I've spent years covering African politics, watching promises made and broken, watching leaders rise and fall. I've seen hope extinguished time and time again. But what I saw in Ibrahim Traoré was different. Different in a way that forces you to sit up, to listen closely, and to rethink everything you thought you knew about Africa's future. Burkina Faso's standard presidential salary is $76,000. That might not sound like much in some parts of the world. But in Burkina Faso, where the average citizen survives on just $73 a month, that figure is monumental. Most would have called it their destiny. Most would have taken the money and turned their backs. Traoré chose another path. He chose to keep his salary as a simple army captain. He chose solidarity over separation, service over self-interest. This decision, simple at first glance, would ripple outward in ways no one could have predicted. It would spark a revolution of thought, a new kind of patriotism, and a bold vision for a continent tired of waiting for someone else to save it. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is not just the story of a president who said no to a paycheck. It's the story of a continent daring, once again, to dream. Ibrahim Traoré did not emerge from the polished halls of elite schools, nor from the corridors of generational wealth. He grew up in the dusty streets of Bondoukoui, a small town in Burkina Faso, where dreams were often smaller than the struggles of daily life. It was there, amid the worn roads and under the vast African sky, that a boy learned the value of community, of hard work, and of loyalty. He chose geology for his studies, a science rooted in understanding the very land that nurtured him, and later joined the military in 2010, a decision that would shape his destiny. Rising quickly through the ranks, Traoré's leadership in UN, peacekeeping missions, particularly in Mali, earned him the respect of peers and commanders alike. His reputation was not built on political games or high-level endorsements. It was carved through action, through sacrifice, through leading men into danger and bringing them back alive. By the time Burkina Faso fell into deep crisis in 2022, overrun by insurgencies and teetering on the brink of collapse, it was this unassuming captain who dared to step forward. When he seized power in September 2022, critics were quick to label him just another soldier, another opportunist cloaked in patriotism. Yet, Traoré immediately set himself apart. Refusing the presidential salary of $76,000, an astronomical sum compared to the $73 monthly average, he instead chose to retain his captain's modest pay. And this wasn't just symbolic. It was a statement that thundered through the streets, farms, and schools of Burkina Faso. I am not above you, I am one of you. But Traoré didn't stop there. He slashed the salaries of ministers and high-ranking directors, dismantling a bloated, self-serving government culture. Where others padded their pockets, he tightened the nation's belt. Where others built mansions, he built factories, textile mills to revitalize local industry, gold refineries to keep precious resources from slipping into foreign hands, agricultural, processing plants to boost food independence, schools to nurture the next generation. Every decision reflected one guiding principle: Burkina Faso must stand on its own feet. These were not grand gestures meant for the cameras. They were real, tangible shifts that touched the lives of ordinary citizens. Children who once studied under trees now sat in real classrooms. Farmers who once watched their crops rot for lack of processing facilities now sold their produce to local plants. Young workers, who might have fled for Europe's uncertain promises, found jobs in the new factories rising against the skyline. In a continent where political promises often dissolve into dust, Traoré's actions became his loudest speech. He was not playing politics. He was rebuilding a nation. So let's ask the hard question. If one leader could do all this in just 2 years, what have others been doing for decades? Was it truly so impossible to invest in schools rather than Swiss accounts? To build factories rather than fences around private villas? To serve rather than siphon? Traoré's story forces uncomfortable reflections not just in Burkina Faso, but across an entire continent hungry for something more. It begs leaders, citizens, and observers alike to rethink what African governance can and should look like. Because if a humble captain from Bondokui can stand against the tide of corruption and dependency, maybe, just maybe, Africa's long-awaited dawn isn't as distant as it once seemed. And still, this is only the beginning. When Ibrahim Traoré assumed leadership, he understood something vital. Burkina Faso's war was no longer about holding ground. It was about winning hearts, asserting dignity, and responding swiftly to threats that had long outpaced a stagnant bureaucracy. In the past, when terrorists struck a village or seized a town, the government would spend a month drawing battle plans, holding meetings, sending reports back and forth. By then, the damage was done. Villages were razed, families displaced. Hope suffocated. Traoré changed all of that with a simple but revolutionary doctrine: reaction within 24 hours. No endless consultations, no red tape. If an attack occurred today, retaliation and defense began tonight or by dawn. This lightning-fast strategy flipped the battlefield dynamics entirely. Suddenly, insurgents could no longer attack without fear of immediate reprisal. They could no longer count on weeks of bureaucratic inaction. In Burkina Faso, under Traoré, action now spoke louder than diplomacy. The contrast to previous regimes could not have been starker. During France's military presence, Burkina Faso was awash in foreign soldiers, surveillance drones, and intelligence satellites. And yet, terrorist strongholds seemed to multiply like wildfire. How was it, Traoré wondered aloud, that a nation, monitored from the sky 24/7, could somehow miss the growth of these extremist enclaves? Now, with the French gone, and foreign eyes no longer directing the narrative, Burkina Faso's own forces were tracking, targeting, and dismantling insurgents, them faster and more effectively. It raised unsettling questions about who truly benefited from prolonged instability. And if that revelation sparked discomfort, it only fueled a deeper flame. Nationalism. Traoré didn't just reorganize the military. He reignited a fierce, uncompromising love for country. Patriotism, once a hollow slogan on government posters, became a living, breathing movement. Ordinary farmers, teachers, shopkeepers stepped forward as volunteers. Young men who had once considered fleeing now took up arms to defend their homes. Women sang songs of unity at marches. Patriotism gave the nation something even stronger than guns' purpose. Logistics could be borrowed, intelligence could be learned, but purpose? Purpose was something no foreign government could ever manufacture or destroy. And yet, as Traore's Burkina Faso rose from the ashes, hypocrisy festered within its own walls. Some judges, aligned with old regimes or influenced by external powers, began to question whether the war was even real. The Supreme Court went so far as to claim that no active conflict existed in the north, implying that Traoré was fabricating unrest to justify his leadership. Traoré's response was cold and devastatingly clear. "If you doubt the war, then you shall see it yourself." He ordered magistrates to visit the front lines, to stand in the smoking villages, to hear the gunfire for themselves. After that, there were no more declarations from cushioned courtrooms, only silence, the silence of men confronted by a truth too raw to deny. In this war, Traoré was fighting on two fronts, one against insurgents with rifles, the other against institutions poisoned by cynicism and self-interest, and he fought both with the same relentless urgency, because for him, the survival of Burkina Faso was not a legal debate or an abstract concept. It was a fight for breath, for blood, for the right to exist on their own terms. This wasn't just a different military strategy. It was a different way of believing in a nation, and as the old order trembled, a new Burkina Faso, battered, bloodied, but unbowed, began to rise. True leadership is tested not in moments of comfort, but in times of adversity. Ibrahim Traoré knew this deeply. His leadership style wasn't crafted behind grand palace gates or refined through endless summits. It was forged in the raw, urgent reality of a nation fighting for its soul. One defining hallmark of Traoré's leadership has been his radical proximity to the people he serves. He does not rule from a golden throne, but walks the dusty streets, listens to grievances firsthand, and apologizes publicly when things go wrong. In an era where many leaders treat apologies as weaknesses, Traoré turned humility into strength. When a neighborhood in Ouagadougou suffered from government oversight, Traoré didn't send a spokesperson. He stood among the citizens himself, offered a heartfelt apology, and promised swift corrective action. Few African presidents step out. Without heavy security, fewer still admit fault openly. But here was Traoré, embodying a leadership philosophy rare in both rhetoric and reality. His ethos is clear. Action speaks louder than words. Traoré's government doesn't announce massive campaigns to end poverty with grand ceremonies. They simply open schools. They don't declare war on corruption through endless televised speeches. They freeze assets and prosecute offenders. They don't proclaim agricultural revolutions at international conferences. They distribute equipment, seeds, and training to farmers in remote villages. This focus on tangible results over lofty promises distinguishes Traoré from so many others. Across Africa, citizens have grown tired of political theatre, the parades of empty pledges, the expensive elections yielding little change. Traoré cuts through the noise with the only language that truly matters: results. And it is these results that are forcing an overdue conversation across the continent. For too long, Africa has been told that its salvation lies in Western systems: imported democracies, outsourced governance, development plans drawn up in foreign capitals. Yet in Burkina Faso, a different narrative is unfolding. A narrative where African problems are met with African solutions, where leaders are not beholden to foreign donors but to their own people. What if Burkina Faso isn't an outlier, but a glimpse of what is possible? What if Traoré's choices are not exceptions, but the beginning of a new African norm? Imagine if across Africa, from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Nairobi to Niamey, leaders governed with the urgency, humility, and patriotism Traoré embodies. If one humble captain could transform a nation in under 2 years, what excuse remains for those who have clung to power for decades with little to show? If 54 African nations each found their own Traoré, could the continent's story finally turn the page from dependence to destiny? What we are witnessing is not just the rise of an exceptional leader. It is the first ripple of a deeper movement, a leadership revolution born from African soil, answering African needs, and fueled by African dreams. Ibrahim Traoré is no longer simply the president of Burkina Faso. He has become a living challenge to the status quo, a symbol that leadership doesn't require luxury, that patriotism isn't naive, and that action, not rhetoric, is the true measure of governance. The world is watching, Africa is awakening, and the next chapter, written not in promises, but in sweat, courage, and stubborn hope, has just begun. Stay with us, because the story of a new Africa is only getting started. The story of Ibrahim Traoré is not simply a tale of a poor boy rising to become president. It is the blueprint for a revolution, not of guns and violence, but of values and vision. It is about redefining what it means to lead in Africa and what it means to serve. Traoré's life and choices tear down the cynical belief that power inevitably corrupts, that leadership must mean wealth, and that hope is just another word for political theatre. Across Burkina Faso, and now far beyond, his name carries more than just the weight of one man's destiny. It carries a question, a challenge, to an entire continent that has waited too long for its true moment to come. Traoré's story reminds us that greatness is not about speeches or suits, but about sacrifice and service. It reminds us that change doesn't come from imported models, but from within. This is more than a story of one leader. This is the birth of a new African leadership model, one that puts dignity above dependency, action above promises, and people above politics. It is a model where humility walks hand in hand with courage, where service is measured not by titles held, but by lives touched. And now, a new question emerges. Who will be the next leader to rise? Will Africa dare to seize its moment? Will this be the generation that refuses to be defined by the shadows of colonialism, corruption, and complacency, and instead chooses to define itself by the fire of renewal, the spirit of solidarity, and the courage to imagine something better? Because, make no mistake, this is just the beginning. The forces that have long sought to divide, to exploit, and to discourage are still present. The old powers, the old temptations, the old betrayals still lurk. But the wind is shifting. Across markets, universities, villages, and cities, young Africans are asking harder questions, demanding better answers, and refusing to settle for the politics of old. In the rise of Ibrahim Traoré, we don't just see a chapter being written. We see the opening lines of a whole new book, one authored not in distant capitals, but on African soil, in African hearts. The awakening has begun. The only question left is, who will carry the torch forward? Thank you for watching and reflecting with us on this incredible journey. If this story stirred something in you, hope, pride, even righteous anger, then you're already part of this new movement. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. Stay tuned, because the true story of Africa's awakening is only just beginning. Together, we are watching history, not from the sidelines, but as participants. Until next time, stay inspired, stay focused, and stay ready. Africa's time is not coming. Africa's time is here.